I invite you to stand for the reading of the Gospel. Coming from Matthew chapter 13, we're reading two sections, one where Jesus reads or shares the parable and one where Jesus explains it. So verses 24 to 30th and then skipping down to 36 to 43. Jesus put before them another parable. The realm of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seeds in his field. But while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the servants of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves then said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with it. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but rather the wheat into the barn." Then Jesus left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples approached him saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the chosen one. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the realm. The weeds are the children of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The chosen one of God will send his angels, and they will collect out of his realm all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the realm of their Creator. Let anyone with ears listen." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. I enjoy watching a television drama on the TV network FX. It's called The Americans. And if you've never watched it and you have Amazon Prime, you can binge watch 4 seasons. And don't blame me after that. It's really good. It's a drama about a fictional family who lives in suburban Washington, D.C. It takes place in the early 1980s while the Cold War is still fierce and deadly serious. The mom and the dad are travel agents, and their 2 children are in high school. But not everything is as it appears on the surface. Because the husband and the wife, while they look and sound like the typical white American couple in suburban Washington, they are in fact spies, born and raised in the Soviet Union and working undercover in D.C. No one knows they are spies, not even their children, both of whom were born in the U.S. Now, this premise is based very loosely on actual foreign national sleeper agents, which countries like the Soviet Union had attempted in the United States, although not as successfully as the show would let you think. And so the spies have missions that involve, as you would imagine, getting American government secrets, information over to the Soviet Union. And the spies have a secret room in their basement where they have all their spy stuff. And they meet periodically with their Soviet handler in D.C. One of them is an expert in martial arts. The other was an expert in weapons. They are both experts at disguises, and they have these wigs and costumes and everything. And they do all these missions, and they go on. Nobody sees who they are or knows who they are. They do their work at the travel agency, which they own, and they do it because it's a great cover for when they have to go out of town to do missions. And as it happens, their neighbor across the street is an FBI special agent who is looking for the sleeper agents from the Soviet Union in D.C. His work is in anti-espionage. Talk about having all this happen right under your nose. In the show, the FBI knows that there's this sleeper agents, and they're always on the lookout for them. And as if that is not enough tension, the FBI's special agent's son falls in love with the daughter of the spies. And like I said, the daughter doesn't know that mom and dad are spies. So the storyline is always full of dangerous missions, both the Soviet spies and the FBI special agents, and all these close calls where they almost always get found out. Never do get found out. All the main characters are so likable, and you get so invested in the storylines for each one of them. Sometimes it's hard to know if you are cheering for the spies or for the FBI to succeed. And there they are, side by side, working as hard as they can in things that they believe in. The conflict is always presented so clear-cut. Each side articulating their vision of the world from their perspective, where they are the ones that are in the right, where they are the ones that are on the good side, even if sometimes implementing their plan requires violence. Any other neighbor on their block, commuting from the suburbs to the city, would never know that they are driving past mortal enemies in that Cold War. The good and the bad, side by side. That's at the center of the parable that Jesus told in today's passage. Jesus has been sharing in our passages over the last few weeks, sharing parables about the realm of God and what that realm of God looks like. And like last week, this is another farming parable. Last week was the seeds that go in good soil and bad, or good areas of the soil and bad areas of the soil. In this one, the wheat, which Jesus says represents the people of God, is just growing, it's doing its thing. And then the weeds, which represent the people of the evil one, are also just there, doing their thing, side by side. To the casual passerby of that field, they may not be able to tell the difference between one and the other. But the servants and the landowner, they know, or at least the servants think they know the difference between the good seeds and the bad seeds, the wheat and the weeds. The servants seem very bothered because they see the good and the bad are right there, happy as could be, basking in the sun, enjoying the water from the rains. And it doesn't seem fair to them. It seems like a waste of the effort of the landowner. On the surface, the servants don't think it sounds fair. They have this impulse, and I get that impulse. It's just pull out the weeds. Let the weed grow by itself. Why are we waiting to take care of this? And so the landowner's plan seems a little confusing, perhaps. Why would there be delay? Why wait until the harvest? The story makes one think that maybe the weeds and wheat are sufficiently similar early on, and then they will be sufficiently different when it comes time for the harvest, so then it might be worth waiting. The temptation with interpreting this passage is to focus on that idea of the all or nothing. The wheat is all good, the weeds are all bad, and, put me in, coach, because I'll take them out. At least that's one level of reading it. And certainly it sounds like that's what Jesus is saying in the explanation. The disciples would have been ready to say, we think we know who the bad people are, and just tell us the word, Jesus. Just say the word, and we will out them. We will run them out of town. We will turn them in, whatever it needs to happen. But that's just it. Did the disciples really know? Time and again, the disciples seem confused about things, and time and again, they miss the point that Jesus is trying to teach. And so I go back and look at that Jacob story to give some context, perhaps, to the parable, to think about the possibility of misreading a situation. Because Jacob, in the story we read from Genesis, is one of those chosen leaders in the Bible that make you wonder what God was thinking about when God chose him. Looks more like a weed to me than wheat early on in his life. We hear in other passages about Jacob and his shenanigans, but in this passage we read about God's perspective and how God was really shaping Jacob, helping Jacob get right. Here's a little context. So last week we talked about Jacob and how he had sort of cheated his brother out of his birthright. Things escalate actually between last week's passage and this week's passage, and now Jacob is on the run. Jacob is running because Esau has figured out what has happened. He wants to kill Jacob. He wants to kill his brother. And so this hike in the wilderness is no leisurely hike. He's trying to stay ahead of his brother. And exhaustion wins, and so Jacob lays down one night, and he's so tired even a rock is a pillow for him. And it is then that he has this vision, this dream. Not an anxiety dream about running away, but a vision of God and a vision of heaven and a vision of angels. And it's because God had, for some reason, chosen Jacob. God had not rejected Esau, but for reasons that are hard to imagine, God wanted this flawed Jacob to be the chosen one for the task ahead. And God uses Jacob to carry on a promise that God had made to Jacob's parents and grandparents, that God would bless them and that they would live there. God shows a patience and a grace that is difficult to grasp. It's refreshing in that sense, because it doesn't make sense, there's no temptation for Jacob to say, well, I am so good, I deserve all the things that God has given me. Instead, Jacob would have to think, God loves me even though I don't measure up day in and day out. I've got my good days, but really it's God being God which allows me to wake up and take a breath, that allows me to go to work and live doing worthwhile things. One of our families in our church, the Rogos, were members a little while ago of a church, a well-known church in Denver, led by a charismatic pastor, Nadia Bowles-Weber. You know what the name of the church is? It jumps out at me every time I read it. House of all sinners and saints. House for all is how they refer to it. It's not like sinners over here, saints over there, but rather that we all carry both labels within us at all times and are yet welcomed by God's grace. There's an acknowledgement that God knows how complexly imperfect we all are, and yet God loves us nonetheless. And so we can take a look at the parable, remembering Jacob and his description, and remembering that it's a description of the realm of God, and remembering that this is how God sees things when things go as God would want. That there is ambiguity and tension by design. That there is grace that comes from knowing that the final result will wait until the very end. And that the decisions will not be made by us, but will be made by a gracious God. Maybe that doesn't sound like grace at first, but it is. It's grace because God won't let us write people off. It's grace because we get to ask ourselves the question that Jacob ought to be asking himself along the way. Am I on God's side or not in this situation? And God gives us the room to be able to get on the right side. It's grace because even with the stark prediction that in the end there will be weeds and weeds set apart, God is both more forgiving and more patient than any of us could begin to imagine. So I wouldn't want to predict how much collection there will be of weeds at the very end. There will be times when I can't tell you if I'm looking at weeds or wheat, if I'm looking at someone working for God or against God. But part of the lesson is that it is not our job to stress about it. Our job is to be fruitful in God. Our job is to be fruitful and to speak of God's fruitfulness in us and through us. And let that speak for itself. God's grace makes no sense. At least no human sense. And we would not be nearly that patient or forgiving. And yet, that is what makes the good news of the gospel rich and enduring. It's good that we are not God, and God is. Thanks be to God for God's word. Amen.